Hi, this is Mark Taparaskas with Developmentor. We're going to talk about FileSavePicker from the Windows Store APIs. The Save Picker lets you show a bit of UI to the user. They get to choose a file, they navigate around their file system, choose a file, specify file name, extension, type, and so on. And then your app gets a storage file back that you then write the user's data into. In Visual Studio, I have a project. In the UI, I have a button with a click handler. In the click handler, let's go to the code behind. In the click handler, we're going to show a file save picker to the user, let them select a file, and then we'll write some simple data into it. So create the picker, and then to show it to the user, you call pick save file async. It returns a storage file, and it's an async method, so we want to await it. Since we're awaiting, we need to add async here. So when that returns, we're going to get back a file which we can write into. I'll use the helper class file.io. If the user cancels, then this file right here is going to be null. So if you wanted to add a little bit of error checking, something like that would be pretty common. When we show this to the user, the assumption is that our app only works with a limited amount of file types, and we can't just show it to the user without specifying which types of files are appropriate for our app. In fact, if we ran this right now, then that pick save file method is going to throw an exception. So we have to add at least one file type filter to the picker before we show it. Let's do plain text to start with. So we call the add method of the file type choices collection. There's a couple of overloads to add. I think this one's the most convenient. The first parameter is a descriptive string that'll appear in the combo box that the user is going to see. So if we're doing text files, we might choose something like plain text. The second parameter is a list of file extensions. For plain text, there's really only one file extension, .text. For other file types, like if you chose image, right, there could be multiple file extensions that would be appropriate. So that's sufficient though, right there. That's sort of minimal amount of code to get this up and running. There are a few other properties that are optional that you can set on the picker. Suggested file name. And the thing that goes along with that really nicely is default file extension. And those two are used to populate the file name text box in the picker UI. So it'll be pre-populated with my file.txt. You can also optionally do suggested start location, and you don't get to choose an arbitrary location. You get to choose from a limited set of options. I'll do documents library, which I think is actually the default. So when I run this now, it'll start right in the documents library showing just text files to the user. I do have a test folder ready to go here that has a couple of text files and one JPEG image in it. And that's in a folder here called test underneath my documents. Let me go back and go ahead and run it. Click on Save. So we start in My Documents, which is where we said to start. Here's the test folder. I'll navigate down into the test folder. All right, so a couple of things to notice. Only the text files are showing up, so the picker is filtering based on the file type choices we added. Down at the bottom, there's this file name text box. It's pre-populated with the suggested file name and the default file extension. On the right-hand side, there's a combo box. Right now, there's one entry in there only, so it's not going to be very interesting to try to use it. And then two buttons, Save and Cancel. So if we click Save, the app gets a storage file object back. If we click Cancel, the app gets null back. Let me go ahead and click Save. There's our file, and inside it is the content that we wrote. I'll delete that for now and go back to the app. The start location, you'll notice it has the word suggested in it. So the suggested start location is only used the first time the app shows this picker. After that, the picker actually remembers the last folder that the user was looking at, and when you run it again, it will restart in that last folder, and that just happens automatically behind the scenes with no interaction on your part. So if I run this again, we should start in the test folder. Let's go ahead and see, run it, click on Save, and we are in the test folder. I'm going to remove some of this optional code here just to keep it clean and simple. And remove the error checking. Let's talk a little bit more about the file type choices selection. So suppose our app supports two different types of files. So we have text files there and XML text. When we run it now, the user is going to have a choice, and when it comes back to us here as this storage file, we can test which the user selected and write the data in the appropriate format. So we could do something like this, switch on file.fileType. And file type is a string that's going to contain the extension, either .text or XML. So I added two cases there. Let's put a breakpoint on each one. Run it. So now down at the bottom, that combo box, we have two options, plain text and XML. I'll select XML here, type a file name, and then click on Save. And back in our app, we hit the case for XML. So far, we've only looked at cases where there was just a single file extension here that made sense for each type of file. So suppose we were doing something like image files. So let's add another file type choice here, where there are two different file extensions that make sense for that category. Down in our switch statement, we'll add cases to handle each of those two new extension types. And go ahead and run it. So the user has three options now. We'll select image. Notice our file type filter started showing image files up there. Okay, so I'll add the full file name, including the extension, click Save, and we end up back in our code at the .jpeg case. We explicitly added the JPG extension, so it was sort of obvious, I think, that we were going to hit that case. Let's see what happens, though, when we run this fact, let me delete that file quickly here. Reset our example. All right, so let's run it. And this time we're going to choose image file, but we will not specify a file extension on the file name. So select image file. All right, so notice no file extension on that name and click save. And we end up in the JPG case. And the reason we end up there is because that's listed first back here in this list of string. So the order that you list them in the list is actually significant. Let's run this one more time and see what happens if the user does something silly. So run this, click on save, and have the user select image file again. So the user types in a file name, and then they add an extension that's not appropriate for this file type, like they might do .dat, right, for data. So our file type filter is in our combo box is set to JPEG. Let's see what happens when we click save. So the JPG extension still got added, the first one in that list. If we look at the file here in the debugger, you can see the name right there, other file .dat .jpeg. So that what the user thought was the extension didn't actually get used as the extension. Right? We still added the first extension in the list. And there's one final case that's worth mentioning. Let me go ahead and run this. So the FileSavePicker does let the user navigate their local machine. You can see several options here, including computer, right, which is sort of the root of the local file system, network, and it even works for SkyDrive. Let's see what happens if we go up all the way to computer here. All right, so there's local disk C. If I look at the root of my C drive, there's a few folders listed, but you'll notice that there's some missing, like Windows and program files are missing. So those are system folders, and the user isn't allowed to navigate to them. I can choose something else, like if I choose Intel here, and text file, my file, click save. All right, I end up there. So that this all works fine in that case. Okay, but again, it does not FileSavePicker won't let the user navigate and select folders in the system directories. Once again, this is Mark Taparaskas with Developmentor. Thank you very much.